Hello, everyone. This is David Nagel. Welcome to another episode of the Successful Mind Podcast. Today, my guest is Hillary Walsh. She is an award-winning, nationally renowned immigration attorney. She's a published author and a law professor at one of the top law schools in the nation, and she's a wildly successful entrepreneur. Her mission in life is to help others put meaning to their painful past and then start living the life that they once couldn't even imagine, which sounds pretty cool to me. Hillary, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. How are you?
Doing absolutely fantastic. You have an amazing story. I mean, you came from a very interesting past. Um, you've become very successful. You have a beautiful family. How were you able to make that transition? Tell us where you started. Like, where did your life start? What was going on back then when you were a kid?
Back then, when I was a kid, I
Yeah.
grew up in rural Kansas. So in the middle, I jokingly but very seriously grew up in the middle of a field. The other day, I was showing some of my employees who are remote a Google Maps view of where I grew up, like literally the dirt road that I grew up on. And they were kind of chuckling because they said, when you said that it was the middle of a field, I didn't believe you, but it really is. It's wide open spaces. And I grew up to with a mom and dad who I'm one of four children, I'm the second in line. And my parents got married right out of high school. My mom was still 17. And over time, my dad developed a very serious alcohol problem and kind of messed around a little bit with gambling as well. I don't know that I can't diagnose anybody, but it definitely seemed like it was a great thrill for him, and it became a problem because we didn't have any money. So we moved from Arkansas, then we moved to Kansas in the middle of the night when I was in kindergarten. And it was it was a very dangerous environment a lot of times because of the dynamic between my parents and the fact that my mom felt so unsafe. And then over time, I came to realize how abused I was. I was put into foster care because of some severe physical abuse. The emotional abuse was worse, and eventually got put into foster care for a short stint. I
Did
screwed
they
around.
so did somebody come take you out of the house, or did your parents put you there?
I was taken away by the state. I was taken out of the home. I
So
was beaten.
somebody reported the abuse then.
Yeah, I was beaten severely and sent to school the next day. And I had all the markings all over me. I tried to lie to the principal when he questioned me about it. And they had a duty to report it to the state. It was really interesting looking back. In the principal's office, my mom came in, I was there, and the principal said, well, I'm sure she deserved it, but I have a duty to report it to the state.
Wow.
This was just this was 20 years ago. I'm 35 now. And it happened when I was 15. So I guess this was in the year 2000. And those types of things still happen, right? And it's really
Sure.
remarkable that even when we think that we've moved into a different era, how these are still things that are very normal. In my heart of hearts, I don't know that my mom and dad, I think that my mom has told me even recently, in the past probably 2 or 3 years, that she felt like I deserved it. And so this was just something that was ingrained in the cycle that was my family, this abuse cycle. Part of it was learned, and then you just repeat it. And
Right.
those are patterns that are really dangerous to continue. I was put in foster care. I skipped play practice and went to Sonic with friends instead and got reported as a runaway. And there I found myself in lockup for runaway bad kids.
Wow. And this
And
is at 15.
this was when I was 15. So, and I'd never cheated on a test, never really, I mean, I had forged my mom's signature on my clarinet practice card a few times.
You hardened criminal, you.
Exactly. It's like nobody wanted to hear that anyway. I was not a talented clarinetist. And it was, the rock bottom moment for me was the first time I engaged with the legal system, which was walking into the little courthouse in my hometown of a couple thousand people and knowing that it was the first time I was going to see my parents again after being taken from the home.
Okay.
And when you're 15 and you have a lot of serious marks all over your body from outward trauma, and you know that the inward trauma is worse, And
Yes.
you know you're going to go see those people who you want them to love you so much, and yet you're so scared of them. In walks, we're about to go into what they said was a meeting with the judge. I had no idea who a judge was, what a judge was. I have only from TV. And at that point, I was so sheltered. I was watching Little House on the Prairie still.
Right.
So I had no idea what was going on. And in
So
walks
did
this,
you, well, let me ask you a question really quick. At this time when this was going on, did you know that you were in an abusive environment at this time of your life?
no,
You didn't know.
I
Okay.
I
All right.
thought that I had screwed up, and this is what I had deserved. That
Okay.
this is what happens. And I didn't know that even getting put into foster care was as severe as it was until I was in law school taking a family law class and learned all the steps you have to go through in order to take a child from the home, because the right to parent your kids the way you want to parent them is a really big deal in American law and in our value system. And that's the first time that I remember going home and really being shaken up, just reading those cases talking about this little boy or this little girl being taken from the home, and whether or not the government, the state, had a right to step in and tell someone how to raise their kids, and how severe it is to take a child and put them in foster care. And that's when I started to realize it must have been really, really bad, because the person who was experiencing it expected it. The 15-year-old expected this type of treatment, you
Okay.
know? So I'm in the
Sure.
courtroom. I'm in a waiting room, essentially outside the courtroom, waiting to see my parents for the first time since all of this had happened. And mind you, when you go into foster care for abuse, they strip you down and they take pictures of your naked body, and you're all bruised up, and it's a very humiliating experience. But the state has to cover its tracks, right? The state has to show that they are. And so, that, like, looking back, I know that those pictures are somewhere, and
Right.
that someone has seen them. And it's I there was no way I could get consent to that, because I was just doing what everyone told me to do. But in walks this guy before we go into the hearing and says, he's in a suit, and he says it's time to go in. And so we walk in and we sit down, and my parents are at a table with their lawyer, who is a common, like, the lawyer in our little town. And then we sit at this other table, and there's this bench, and then a judge comes in, and we stand and we sit down. And this guy who'd come in with me in the suit, come to find out, he was my lawyer, my state appointed lawyer.
Okay.
And the judge asks him, does your client want to be reunified with her parents? And at the time, I was still it was really fresh, and I didn't want to go back home yet. I was still really scared of the environment and everything that had kind of come to a head leading to being put in foster care. But I wasn't about to say that, because my mom and dad are sitting right there. And he says, yes, she's ready for family reunification.
Did they
And
ask you?
they did not ask me.
Interesting.
And, years later in the immigration court context, the same type of thing happens. I at least understood what was going on. But so many times the judge asks the lawyer, on behalf of your client, what do you want to say for them? And the client has no voice. And so it has been, people often ask me, why immigration? I don't really have any immigration in my family,
Right.
other than my father-in-law, who's a Canadian American Canadian, now, but he's Sean's dad.
Yeah.
I think that I was just really drawn to this area because I saw something in myself. And that's what gives so much meaning to pain, right?
Right. Why don't the kids have a voice at that age, or in that situation? I don't know that it's age specific, but what I'm finding really curious is that, so they strip you down, you're naked. I mean, this, like you said, it's an unbelievable, humiliating experience. It has to also be quite scary, I would imagine. Um, they appoint you an attorney. You don't have a meeting with this attorney. They just take you from your in processing to the courtroom. Why are they not asking you what you want to do? Do you know the reason to this?
This was a failure on that attorney's part.
It was a failure on the attorney's part.
Yeah. They absolutely should have talked to me beforehand and advised me of what was going on. And then if I was unable to make a decision, then they could have had someone appointed to speak on my behalf. I was, 15 years old. I was really well
Right.
spoken, and absolutely could have said, I think that right now I'm not ready to go home. in any event. No one asked. And that was definitely, when we look back on rock bottom moments, that's definitely a rock bottom for me. It
I
was
can,
it was the one of the first of many times I thought I would just rather die. I just would rather kill myself than have to endure this.
right. How were you coping with this at the time?
I think, music and the arts are a really great coping mechanism. Fortunately, at 15, I wasn't into any riffraff, because as you get older, you learn to cope with other things because you can go to the liquor store and buy an escape bottle.
Right.
But at
So there
15,
was no negative coping at this age
no,
in
there
any
was
way?
no negative coping, no drugs, no alcohol. I think a little bit later, I think the first time I drank alcohol was 16, but it wasn't because I was trying to escape from anything. I was just trying to fit in.
Okay.
But there really was no negative coping. I also think that it didn't just happen one day. I'd had 15 years to
Yes.
prepare for that moment.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, child abuse is a horrific thing. The fact that this attorney did this, um, here's a question. When you're sitting there with that attorney, does the judge see the pictures of you naked? Does the judge get to see those pictures? Do they present that as part of the
And
case?
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do.
Is it I just wonder what the reason is. I mean, I've talked to people about this over the years, and I've heard, the system is just swamped with cases. The worst cases are the ones that get the most attention. I had a client one time who had a couple of kids with an abusive mom, and the father was desperately trying to get custody of the children, and he was going to attorney after attorney after attorney, and they all told him the same thing. They said, listen, every day these judges see kids that are raped, burned with cigarettes, beaten, bruised, tortured in all different kinds of ways, and they're going to look at your case and they're going to be like, this is not a problem.
I think that is especially true in some of our more rural areas where that type of behavior, because I know like my dad was severely beaten as a child, and that was discipline. My mom
Yeah,
was severely abused by her stepdad, the person who when he was alive was my grandpa and still is my grandpa.
it's very
Because
much generational.
very much generational. And so there comes a point where, we're repeating, as you've worked with me on, repeating the same patterns that we see over and over and over, and then making a conscious decision where we decide to cut it out and we're just not going to do it anymore. And sometimes that decision is daily while we're homeschooling because COVID and everything else, that it becomes, everything is like a little pressure cooker sometimes.
Yeah.
And you can default. It's really easy to default to the pattern. It's harder to carve a new pathway. And that's why we see generations of abuse continue and continue. And I see it so much with my clients. The crazy thing for my immigration clients is they're being abused by their US citizen spouse. So they don't have status here. They're here undocumented, illegally, whatever term you want to use. And they're married to someone who has status, and they use that as leverage over them. My clients, many people are put on an allowance. My main client base is Mexican men who are either construction workers or own their own company. So they'll be painters, they'll be they'll do landscaping, they'll own their own business and it's
Okay.
successful. And they're married to a US citizen woman. And that woman completely controls every aspect of that man's life under the threat of, if you get deported, you'll never see your kids again. And Mexican fathers are very, very loving and involved.
Sure.
And if you don't do the things that I want you to do, including making money and giving it to me, and I'm the only one with status, so I'm the only one who has a bank account, and I'll give you $100 allowance a month, then I'm going to call ICE on you.
And this is women doing this to men?
Absolutely.
And you're telling me this happens a lot this way?
Daily. And
I didn't
people,
know.
the wild thing is, people don't know that this is abuse. When I'm talking to clients, I can't even call it abuse because in Mexican culture, much like my upbringing, abuse is severe. I mean, we've had clients who've been beaten with car wires, like the wires that hold the battery and the everything to the car.
Right.
Come out and beat the dad will beat the child with that, and that's what they think of when they think of abuse. And they're like, my wife is not abusing me. And so we have to talk to them in a way that relaxes their subconscious, that tells them, no, 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 this isn't me, and you need to stay safe. Stop talking to this lady. And we have to talk about, are these the type of things that are happening for you? Because this type of control is cruel.
Interesting. That's really fascinating, Hillary. I did not realize that it was that, I mean, typically, especially in relationships, we think of the abusive man, and we're waking up to the idea that women can be just abusive. But this scenario, this specific scenario that you're telling me, that's kind of running rampant, I had never even heard of that before.
Yeah,
That is really fascinating.
kind of blows your mind. Here's what will really rock your world is how US citizen children learn that their parents are undocumented, and then they begin, so the abuse can go the other way, right? We can have
Really?
child abuse and then we can have parental abuse. So once kids realize that if they threaten to call ICE on their parents, that their parents will shut up and they can go to the party when they're 16, or go out and I want this dress for me for my prom. I don't care if you don't have enough money, you go out and get it, or I'm calling ICE on you. It is shocking. And these will be parents who the last thing they want to do is say a bad word about their child. No one wants to say, even if it's the cold hard truth, say
Right.
that my child is constantly threatening me and completely controlling me. And if I want to stay here for her younger sister and brother, the 8 and the 10-year-old, then I gotta get in line and do whatever she wants. And this isn't just 16-year-old kids. This is 25 and 30-year-old US citizen children who they just figured out they can manipulate their parents, and that they have continued to. Now, this isn't every single family, obviously, but this
Right.
is where I really believe that my background and having observed my mom and dad and given them a lot of love, and we've had a complete as you can restoration of what happened in the past, and using that for me as a motivation to sit down and have hard conversations with people and love them, and know that every family has its dysfunction, and the more we pretend that we don't, the bigger the animal and the monster becomes. Then it helps. I really think that my past has helped give so much meaning, and I talk about like planting a seed, and it's going to be an orchard soon, because once we fix one person's immigration status, it's going to completely transform for generations long after I'm dead and gone, long after
Yeah.
my kids are dead and gone. The work we're doing now is going to transform well after all of us are off doing something totally different.
Sure. Sure. So let me ask you this. What, because a lot, so many children that come from abusive families really have messed up adult lives, like severely dysfunctional adult lives. But you chose a different path for yours. How did you come about the consciousness or the decision to do that? And was it conscious, or did you start going in this direction for a different reason and then you kind of woke up later?
A little bit of both, I think. When I met Sean, I was 19, and I felt very safe with him. I Sean doesn't have a violent bone in his body. And then when I met his family and I saw that they weren't dangerous people. And I remember my mom telling me that something that she liked about my dad was his family. So when I'm 19 and I meet Sean's family for the first time and realize, maybe there's something to this, and that guiding thing that my mom had taught me, that, you see someone's family, and if it's really dysfunctional, there's probably dysfunction underneath the rug,
Yeah, sure.
And so at 19, I don't know. Sean was 24. I don't know how we made the decision that lasted. We just had our 15th wedding anniversary. I'm really proud of us.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really proud of us. And, growing up, I was a really hardcore Republican, and I was really against gay marriage because I grew up in a really strict Baptist home. And, you know, just so many things that were so rule based that made everything about sometimes my own core wrong. and then to slowly get to transform. And I'm happy that Sean transformed with me, because I am a human rights, I don't know, a lover. And I'm so passionate about that. And if someone wants to marry, if a man wants to marry a man, I want to know how I can help be part of that and
Yeah.
help make that happen, because it is such a beautiful thing. And I love when people can be who they are meant to be, like who with a capital W, who they are meant to be. And
Was it Sean? So do you think it was Sean's family that started to like kind of preempt the idea that you started opening your mind then? Like what opened your mind to start really reevaluating your belief system? Because those are hardcore beliefs. I mean, let's
for
call
sure.
it what it is, right? I mean, I understand where they come from, but generally when you put those ideas into a small child's mind, they have a hard time shaking those as an adult because it's so absolute. There has to be something behind it where they want to start changing. So how did that happen for you?
I think traveling. So I spent, the first few years of married life in remote Japan. And
Okay.
so where we were stationed with Sean's job, and
He's
getting
in the
to,
Air Force. Yes.
he's in the Air Force,
Yeah.
he's pilot in the Air Force, and getting to be around people who were a lot more worldly than I was. One of our good friends grew up on a hippie commune in California, and becoming so close with him and his wife, and we're still good friends all these years later. It was really great to finally have a different perspective. And if I had still been in rural Kansas and met that same person, I would have said, "You're not like me. We're just never going to get along."
Yeah.
But instead, I was taken out of my natural habitat, completely in culture shock, and forced into a new way of being. And that, I think, laid the foundation for, maybe I don't know everything. I'm 20, 21 years old. Maybe I don't know everything. And then we just got to travel everywhere. And we've been to like 50 countries in the past 15 years, and a
Yeah.
lot of that's been with kids. So hard earned travel.
Yeah.
And I think that
Great
that has
education though.
been, yeah, it really is. There's nothing better for appreciating our country, because we lived in Korea for several years, and um, you know there's so much great about Korea, and I really had a wonderful experience there. But what I can appreciate about my country, our country, coming from places like Korea, is, you know, we're not so wrapped up in bloodlines, right? So if a woman has a baby out of wedlock in Korea, it's going to be hard for her to get married to a Korean man, because that Korean baby is never going to be the man's bloodline. And so you have these state-funded orphanages in Korea, because moms are basically forced, even in 2020, to choose, do I want to have a family, or do I want to be single and essentially almost viewed as a social outcast? And so I need to put this baby into a home, and I'll visit the baby in this institution as it grows up and then ages out and moves on with life. And
Yeah.
those are the decisions. And I love that in the United States, we have step parents, we have stepmoms, and blended families. And I refer to myself as a mutt. I don't know where I came from or what I am, and I don't need to know. I'm an American, and those values are so much bigger than the piece of paper you do or don't have. And that includes my clients, kids who they came to this country as 2 years old, and they stood and pledged allegiance to the same flag that is draped over all of our soldiers' funerals, right? Or
Yes.
over their caskets.
Yes.
Um, you know, being American is pretty awesome.
It is awesome. It is. I'm really glad that you had that experience. Were you able to see the diversity about being in other countries? It's amazing. I know that it woke me up to so many different things when I started to be able to travel and see how other people live and really observe. But it's still, I have to say, there are people that do that where their minds are completely closed, and it doesn't matter wherever they go, they only see the world through the model that they have for themselves. And you didn't do that. You were open. So there's something there for you that really created that that openness. What what are you doing with your message right now, as far, because I know that it's really close to your heart to be able to talk to people about this and to benefit the lives of others, really to be in service around others. So, what are you doing with this? Where are you going to go with it?
Great question. It's
Not
something
to
that's
put you on the
still,
spot.
I know it's still kind of brewing, right? So the cool thing is every day when I step into a consultation, I know that I'm in the presence of greatness. Someone who walked across a desert to make a better life for themselves, I got something to learn from them because I've just had to basically roll out of bed and go to school and put one foot in front of the other and had a lot of opportunity handed to me. And to be able to help my immigration clients give meaning to their pain, right? Like,
Yeah.
yes, your 21-year-old US citizen child is being completely abusive of you. And now we can use your painful past to create a beautiful future, right? So that's kind of the, in the sense of the law firm, the lawyer hat. But one of the things that I've had as a recurring, I guess it's a memory. It's in the future, but I think it's a memory.
Okay.
Um, is really being on stage and talking to a lot of people and really being vulnerable and sharing with people that you know everybody, that there is a purpose for everything that we have been through. And in 2020, right, like the things that people, the loss that people are going through right now, every 27 seconds someone in the United States dies of COVID and or COVID related complications. And we're going to have a lot of loss, and trying to, just from this year alone and going into the future, trying to put meaning to that. I don't want anybody to feel like they have to put meaning to it today. No one should. Grief and
Yeah.
loss and all those things have to take time. But as you mourn that, as you mourn wanting the love of your parents and your parents not knowing how to give that to you, and really getting into an abusive situation, um, wow, I wouldn't be who I am if I hadn't experienced that. I am
Right.
grateful for that experience every single day. And what I want to do is help give people not only that connection point of this is the pain, this is the purpose, this is how it further serves me. Life gives breath to more life. But I really want to provide people with accountability. I know that right now you're doing, one of my BFFs is in one of your 90-day, you're doing every single day, you're doing a check-in. And that type
Yeah.
of accountability is extraordinary. People need accountability. Otherwise, you get all jazzed up, rah, 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 and then you go back to your own patterns and your own old processes.
Yeah. Nothing changes.
Nothing
Exactly.
changes. So for me, it's when I was working with you at Date with Your Dark Side, the big takeaway for me was that all this time I felt like I wasn't special, because I know about those cases you were talking about where kids are burned with cigarettes and they're put in a room and left abandoned, and they come out and they've just barely survived. And those types of things, it doesn't have to be because of abuse. It could just be malnourishment across
Yeah.
the world. And so you start thinking, I'm really not that special. And on one hand, I'm not, right? We're all here in service of each other. But what I went through and what you went through and what anyone listening goes through, when you think about what your rock bottom moment is, it matters because you can use it to serve so many more people.
Yeah. People don't, I don't think people realize how well off you are, especially if you're in this country. 2/3 of the world lives on $2 a day. And even at the worst poverty level here in the United States, we're rich compared to that. But if you don't have anything to compare it to, you don't know. If you're comparing it to a celebrity, you think that you're just the bottom of the world, and actually you're not. You're much wealthier. We're all much wealthier than we realize, both emotionally, spiritually, and physically, in what we're able to do for other people. And my personal belief is that we need to live lives of service. We need to be in service to others so that we can all move forward as a society.
I agree. And I think that as a collective, a lot could be done if those, like malnourishment, like the lack of food for people across the globe, if we collectively decided one day that we were just going to solve that problem, the problem would be solved, right? There's just
Yes.
no question about it. But if we are so concerned, and this is where we look at like the American dream as a pie chart, how big is the pie? Because if I have other people who come in and want to take my piece of the pie of the American dream, then that's depriving me of something. When in reality, the American dream, if we really look at it for what it is, it's limitless. And it
It
can
is.
be shared, and those values, and um, just getting to be an entrepreneur. People come and make, and it's because they're helping others.
Right.
They are able to survive. Otherwise, your business is going to go out of business pretty fast. I agree with you, though.
Yeah. Okay. So let's kind of bring this in a little bit. If you had to leave everybody with a successful mind tip, something that you would like to recommend for everybody, something general that people could use that could make a difference in their life, what would that be?
Make incremental changes, right?
Incremental changes. Say why.
Small changes, because I think if you want exponential growth or a quantum leap, those things aren't necessarily by getting on the top of a building and I'm going to jump like Spider-Man over to the other building.
Right.
You talk often about how you had just decided, I don't remember what your first phrase is, but just you're going to show up and do a good job. You're basically going to have a good attitude.
Yeah.
That is, to anyone else, they might notice your energy is differently or is different, or that you might be performing better, or they're not having to ride your ass about something, Dave, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But it is an incremental shift, and it's within yourself. It is the smallest turn of the dial that can make those things happen. When I realized that no one cared whether I spoke Spanish or not, and whether I was communicating through a translator or not, because I don't speak Spanish, and 90% of my clients are Spanish speakers. When I just made that shift that they don't care, why do you care? I'm just going to be me, and they're going to come or they're not going to come.
Yeah.
No one could see that around me, but it was just one small shift inside me that now I love it, because I'm actually learning Spanish because I have a translator who's sitting next to me, and I get a good chuckle out of everybody when I talk and I have this horrible accent, So those for me are the big takeaways, every single, because if you try to do like some huge, massive change, you might lose what the purpose of it is. You might lose why you're doing it to begin with. But small incremental changes, I don't know what I put this in it's like big doors swing on small hinges.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great metaphor, because it's really true. It's really true. People, they don't realize how those small changes, how big of a result they actually get from it. I know when I first did it, it astounded me. Like, I was shocked. I had no idea that my life could change that much by just changing 3 little things in my attitude. But it was so encouraging when it happened. Like, I wanted more. I wanted to know more. I wanted to do more. I wanted to learn. So that's phenomenal advice. It really is. And I really want to celebrate you for stepping out and talking about this. The things that you told me today about the way this abuse is working, that's a message in and of itself. Like, if you went out and got that out on other podcasts, did interviews, you could get on the news. Like, I encourage you to take that, let people know, wake people up to what's actually happening, because awareness stops those things. The only time anything's ever eradicated from our society is when people stand up together and say, enough, no more. We're not putting up with it anymore.
Yeah.
It loses its power.
I also think that the power of, and this is something where I come back to, like, my stuff matters and your stuff matters, and Joe Schmo over there, the things that you've been through, it matters, is because this is a Malcolm Gladwell finding. But when we talk about people in an aggregate, so like 1 million people have, I'm just using this as an example, but like, let's say 1 million people have drowned in the Mediterranean, fleeing violence in North Africa, trying to get to Italy. Okay,
Wow.
let's pretend that that's the number. I think it's probably more. But then when that one little boy's body washed up on the shore, and that picture went out everywhere, we put a face to that name, and people acted because of that one little boy, and actually putting one person's face to all of this greater struggle, and really understanding the true loss of, we can talk about the millions of people who are hungry every day, and we see one picture of a person who's going through that, and that's where we can connect with it. And that's why our stuff matters. There are millions of children every day who are being abused by their parents. But when we talk about one person, we can start to bring awareness to it. And that is really where the power is for change.
Fantastic. Hillary, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate having you.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so grateful.